For service delivery now, the Ombudsman for long-term insurance says that complaints against insurers fell last year, even though more policies were sold. It says insurers are starting to take up the principles of treating customers fairly. Long-term insurance covers disability, health and life policies. The Office of the Ombudsman received about 9,250 complaints, which is a reduction of 8%. Nearly 30% of the cases that were closed were resolved wholly or partially in favour of the complainants. And the Ombudsman saved insured people nearly 150 million rand. Well, to discuss, we're now joined by the Ombudsman, Ron McLaren. He joins us from our studio in Cape Town. Thank you, Ron. Is this good news? How fairly is the long-term industry playing with customers?
Good evening. Thank you for having me on the show. Would you kindly repeat that question?
Ron, is this good news? How fairly is this industry playing?
Well, I think by and large, most of the subscribing members which we have adhere to the principles of treating customers fairly, and certainly they are offering training sessions aimed towards the implementation of the TCF principles, and by and large, in my view, the industry is operating fairly and treating customers fairly.
Ron, you may be hearing some interference. Please only listen to my voice. You talk about these treating customer fairly principles. Just tell me about those. Apparently they're not formally implemented, but on the cards.
Yes, certainly the principles have 6 outcomes or goals to achieve, and these are very briefly that firstly, the customer must be confident that fair treatment is central to the culture of the firm with which he or she deals. Goods and services sold must suit the needs of the customer. The customer must be fully and properly informed and be kept informed before, during and after the contract. Services rendered must be appropriate to the needs of the customer and must take account of all the relevant circumstances. Products and services rendered must perform in accordance with what the customer was led to believe. And finally, there must be no undue post-sale obstacles placed in the way of a customer who wishes to change a product or who wishes to complain about it.
All right, so
you pointed out that these principles have not yet been legislated. The Financial Services Board indicated early in 2014 that the principles will be implemented incrementally and gradually, and that it already expects regulated bodies to apply the TCF principles in the conduct of their business affairs.
So while things are getting better, you say that some life insurers are not applying these principles quite blatantly. Are you able to name and shame any of the transgressors, Ron?
No, we have a confidentiality arrangement with our subscribing members, and if there are manifestations that any subscribing member does not adhere to the TCF principles, those instances can and will be reported to the Financial Services Board, which is the controlling authority.
All right, you say that...
But in the experience of...
Ron, let me move on, because you say that the majority of complaints are due to contractual issues or non-disclosure. Are customers, because this is such an important issue across industries in South Africa, are customers reading these contracts and understanding them? Are they simple enough and are they fair?
Some of the agreements, policy agreements, are very long documents, and we in the office even have difficulty in understanding all the terms of a policy. If you have an insurance policy which runs into more than 100 pages, it is very difficult to understand and even to come to grips with all the terms of such a lengthy document, which has got complex provisions in it. And this is certainly something which I believe that with the full implementation of TCF is a matter which the regulator will probably look at in the future. We do have examples of complaints which indicate that there has not been a proper understanding on the part of the policyholder of the provisions of the policy, and that there is then a divergence between the expectations of the policyholder and what the policy actually delivers. During the course of our complaints handling processes, we've identified certain causes of such a divergence, and we found that it occurs even if the insurer adheres strictly to the terms of the policy. It may be that the policy was inappropriately marketed, or that the policy wording is not sufficiently clear, or that the design of the policy is outdated or inappropriate for the particular purchaser of the product, and also there may not have been sufficient communication between the insurer and the policyholder during the currency of the agreement.
All right, so we must hold these businesses to account for keeping this simple. Final question for you, Ron, because your office raised an interesting case where an insurer, a life insurer, wanted proof of an HIV test after somebody had died. Is this something that customers have to think about if you're taking out life insurance? Just tell me about the specifics of that case.
Well, I'll start off by immediately answering in the affirmative the question which you put to me. The facts of this matter are very briefly that a person took out a policy that happened during July 2012. At the time of the application, a question in the application form was required the person to indicate whether he or she had undergone and had a negative HIV test result in the preceding 3 years. If the person answered that question in the affirmative, the policy was issued and there was no request to prove or to produce the negative test result. The person concerned died in January 2013, and the insurer, as it was entitled to do in terms of the policy, called for further information. One of the policy provisions was that the policyholder, the claimant, had to produce the negative HIV test result. In this particular matter, the doctor was ultimately traced, but the doctor had been involved in a motor vehicle collision and could not communicate at all with the claimant. That information was passed on to the insurer, and the insurer had exactly the same experience, that the doctor could not communicate that information. The matter is still being investigated. I do not want to prejudge it, but all sorts of legal complications arise because there's now what looks like a total impossibility to produce the negative test results. and questions of the impossibility of performance and so on.
All right, Ron,
arise.
I have to
But
stop you there,
certainly
but it
this
sounds like we
is-
should
is-
keep proof from these companies, and that does, like you say, raise some legal questions. We'll see if we can follow the outcome. It certainly does sound like a complicated case. That brings us, unfortunately, to the end. That was the Ombudsman for Long-Term Insurance, Ron McLaren, coming to us live from Cape Town. And that is a wrap from Business Review, but I will have a quick business update for you in primetime news after 7 o'clock. See you then.